Claudio Ranieri, regarded as one of the best managers of all time in terms of being a massive icon of the game. We all love him. Let's tell his story here through the thick and the thin, of course, as a manager. But we're going to kick off where it all started. So born in San Saba, a little village inside Rome in October 20th, 1951. He has been a lifelong supporter of AS Roma. And he also started his youth academy career with AS Roma, however, only making 6 appearances for Roma during the 73-74 season, spending a couple of seasons as well in Catronza, another Italian football club, helping the club guide promotion, making 226 appearances, scoring 20 goals for the team. And also played for Palmiro, the other Italian side, which he also helped the club guide promotion. Palmiro, probably a familiar name to many people, helped produce the likes of Paulo Dybala and Edison Cavani, but Ranieri started his career there, never became the most successful player, but still had a very successful footballing career that I'm sure many of us would absolutely adore. Now let's move on to his managerial stint. Okay, so his first managerial stint, he spent a couple of years with one team, Vigor Lamzia, before moving on after a year with not really having too much success with the very low-graded Italian side. He moved to Petulina. Pronunciations are horrible, I know that. We moved there, spending a year there. However, his first managerial stint came with Cagliari in 1988, where he managed to gain successive promotion from the Serie C to the Serie A, and also winning the Coppa Italia in 1989 with Cagliari. Now that put him on the map, really, as a manager, his first proper stint before moving on to Napoli. Let's tell his story at the current Serie A giants. Okay, so in 1991, he moved to Napoli, finishing 4th in his first season and qualifying for the UEFA Cup. During his second season, he was sacked after a disappointing run, but arguably, still to this day, with some Napoli fans, maybe should have stayed because they weren't doing that bad, but nowhere near the height of where they were in his first season. He moved to Fiorentina in 1993, gaining promotion from the Serie B to the Serie A, winning the Coppa Italia as well with the side, and the Super Coppa Italia in 1996. We had a pretty successful stint with Fiorentina, and also losing in the UEFA Cup to Barcelona with the Italian side. But his career decides to take a bit of a change here, as moving outside of Italy for the first time in a very long time, he moves to Valencia in 1997. Let's tell the story of his time in Spain with Valencia and Atletico Madrid. In 1997, Ranieri became the manager of Valencia, a very iconic club in Spain, and he done pretty well in his first season, guided them to 4th in his first season, as well as winning the Intertoto Cup at the time, which is now currently a disbanded cup competition, but at the time was still a fairly iconic / European trophy to the side. He also won the Copa del Rey in 1999 with the Spanish side, and he left Valencia at the end of 1999 with probably the most loved man in Spain and Valencia at the time. But he would move on to Atletico Madrid, where Atletico Madrid was struggling at the time financially, and it represented on the playing pitch, on the brink of relegation, as the club went into administration. Claudio Ranieri resigned as manager at Atletico Madrid, and he now was appointed Chelsea boss about a year later in 2000. Let's tell the story of his Chelsea managerial career. Okay, his Chelsea stint where he spent 3 years at Chelsea. Let's start at the beginning. Ranieri originally struggled. Despite being versed in speaking multiple languages, he struggled to speak English to begin with and had to have help during his training. In his first season, he guided the club to 6th in the league and also brought in some fairly loved players at the time for Chelsea. Frank Lampard being probably the most high-profile one. Also signing the likes of Jesper Gonker and also footballing French legend Petit also joined the club. Unfortunately though for Ranieri, silverware was difficult to come. He did manage to guide the club into the final of the FA Cup before losing 2-0 to Arsenal. But in 2003, this is where things would begin to make a little bit of a change here for Claudio Ranieri, as Abramovich brought Chelsea, and Abramovich gave him a huge budget, signing players like Crespo, Makalele, Wayne Bridge, Joe Cole, Varane, Mutu, and they finished second runners-up to Arsenal that season. They conceded the fewest goals. You know, they had a record for the fewest goals conceded in a Football League season. However, for Ranieri, despite having that amazing record, he would be replaced at the end of the season by current Fenerbahce boss Jose Mourinho in 2004. However, Ranieri did go on to write a book about his final year at Chelsea and talk about his time around about there, and all proceeds of that book went to the Great Osmond Hospital in London. In 2004, Ranieri returned to Valencia, finishing 6th that season, but he was sacked at the end of that season. Kind of had a bit of a misrelationship with the owner at the time, and he was sacked. But now, after a couple of years out of the game, he decided to manage Parma, who were threatened by relegation. But Ranieri, in typical Ranieri style, sorted out the defence, nicked a few goals, and won a lot of games, and managed to guide the club up to 13th in the league, and also steering them clear of relegation. However, ultimately, he would leave at the end of the season after going against signing a contract extension, which he decided to leave, of course. Now we move on to his Juventus stint in 2007. He took over Juventus, obviously the old lady, a very formidable name in Italy. His first season, he finished 3rd with Juventus. Following season, he was dismissed in 2009 after Inter Milan were confirmed champions. After a tough season for Juventus, battling neck and neck with Inter Milan, but Inter Milan ultimately would overtake Claudio Ranieri. Now let's move on to what happens next. In 2009, Ranieri became the manager of AS Roma, his boyhood club, and, you know, later spoilers, I'm pretty sure you guys are all aware, definitely not his final stint, but he became hailed as a hero. Roma dominated the season to begin with, top of the league, regarded as a hero by Roma legend Totti and Roma legend midfielder De Rossi. However, again, in typical Ranieri fashion currently, after doing these things, you'd find out that he later surrendered the league in the final day of the season, also losing in the Serie A Cup final, the Coppa Italia, and he later resigned as manager in 2011, which ultimately would be a really sad day for Roma, but also potentially the right thing to do for Ranieri. In 2011, Ranieri was appointed to Inter Milan boss. It wasn't the most longest stint for Claudio Ranieri. After a decent run to kickstart this season, he struggled, and only winning 2 games in 13, he was later sacked by Inter Milan. He took over Monaco, however, soon after, where he guided the club to promotion to the League and then became runners-up with PSG for the second season. However, he would decide against renewing his contract with Monaco, despite arguably, to this day, having probably one of his most successful manager percent win rates against being with Monaco. That is an incredible business right there, to get promoted from the second tier of France and then to go and compete with PSG. And it set the foundations for a successful club career for AS Monaco that year. Ranieri became the Greek manager later on, became as a bit of a shock to many people managing Greece. He didn't speak the language nor live in Greece, and he did struggle during his time with the club as well, with very limited training sessions. However, he would later be sacked after a defeat to Faroe Islands in a qualifying game. And he later admitted managing Greece was probably one of the biggest mistakes he had ever done as a manager, after only having one training or 12 days of training during, international breaks and his stint with the club. He just couldn't understand how he could turn around Greece in such a short period of time. But now we move on to arguably probably his most memorable, chapter in his footballing managerial career with Leicester City. In July 2015, Ranieri became the Leicester City manager, which became such a shock around the footballing world. His debut came in a 4-2 win against Sunderland. Ranieri often rewarded the team with pizza, champagne and other treats, and also going down to the cinema as well. Top of the league by Christmas, during which Vardy broke the Premier League record for the most goals in a consecutive games. 11 goals that would be. Ranieri spoke to the press often and later announced that he had imaginary bell in training to keep the team focused, and by saying dilly ding, dilly dong, which has become an iconic phrase to the footballing world, as well as nickname probably Ranieri's most famous words that have came from his mouth. Dilly dong, dilly ding. Right, Leicester City became iconic to the footballing world, and Leicester City clinched the Premier League after Spurs failing to win against Chelsea. And one of the greatest shocks in world football, Leicester City won the Premier League. The 5,000 to 1 odds. If you put a bet on Leicester City to win the Premier League that season, she became a millionaire, which was absolutely incredible. The defensive organisation of Ranieri during his time at Leicester having one of the lowest, squad-valued squads in terms of bringing in players. They didn't spend much money, but to win the Premier League, it also won Manager of the Year that year with Leicester City. And he also won an award of Italy as well, becoming the Grand Officer of the Italian Order of Merit, which is incredible. Won the League Manager of the Year award as well. What else could you say about that? However, another twist for Ranieri, controversially later on after the next season, despite having good runs in the Champions League. Unfortunately, the league form was not great, and with Leicester City sitting low in the league, Leicester City made the hard choice to depart with Claudio Ranieri. A lot of rumours do circulate whether it was the players that forced Ranieri out or not. Ranieri spent a couple of years at multiple clubs. In 2017, he became the manager of Nantes. After an uneventful campaign, finishing the side in mid-table, he left the club, and then he made a move back to the Premier League to join Fulham, replacing Slaviša Jokanovic. However, after only 3 wins, he was sacked as manager of Fulham, and Fulham would later on get relegated. My PC decided to make a noise right there. In March 2019, Ranieri became Roma manager once again, despite a massive upturn in form towards the end of the season. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to be able to guide the club into the Champions League, and they narrowly missed out on that Champions League spot, and due to the expiry of his contract, he left at the end of the season. Ranieri became the manager of Sampdoria in October 2019, with the club sitting at the bottom of the league in the time in the Serie A. Ranieri became an act at saving clubs from relegation. He done it with Parma, probably the most notable team, and he guided the club up to 15th, and then he decided to stay on for another season where he guided the club up to 9th, which is probably in most recent years probably the most successful time Sampdoria have had. However, he left at the end of the season. In 2020, 2021, Ranieri returned back to the Premier League with Watford. Watford currently sitting 15th in the Premier League at the time of his appointment, despite incredible results, including a 5-2 away win at Everton and a 4-1 win versus Manchester United. However, he left following a poor run of form, and the club sitting in the relegation zone was replaced by Roy Hodgson, and that would be the last time we would see Claudio Ranieri manage a Premier League club. In 2022, Serie B side Cagliari announced that Ranieri would take over the club, which came as a big appointment to Cagliari, the club which he arguably started his proper managerial career with, and he managed to guide the side to finishing 5th and won in a two-legged playoff match to win promotion to the Serie A. Ranieri did confirm, however, this would be his final club that he would manage, and retired at the end of the season, finishing 16th in the Serie A, keeping Cagliari above waters, and Ranieri left football in typical fashion as a manager, not his farewell. In November 13, 2024, Ranieri became the manager of AS Roma once again. An impressive 19-game unbeaten run, which guided them to 5th in the league, 1 point behind Juventus. The club officially promoted Ranieri to senior advisor to the owners, a dream come true for Claudio Ranieri, also turning down a chance to manage the Italian job to stay with his boyhood club. And yeah, that is where Ranieri's footballing career came to an end, finishing at 5th with AS Roma, just narrowly outside that, and that would end up being his highest percentage win run as a manager. Wow, what a career for Claudio Ranieri. The success, the ups and the downs of one of the greatest managers of all time, in my opinion. Creating the most incredible footballing story with Leicester City. Creating incredible journeys with Cagliari. You know, AS Roma being loved across the world for his time with Valencia in Spain, his time in England with Leicester City, of course, his time in Italy with multiple Italian side, mainly probably being Cagliari, Parma, Sampdoria, and AS Roma, of course. But yeah, if you guys have enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like and follow. If you guys do want to see more of these, let me know. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a great day.